The sun filtered through the towering oaks that lined our quiet cul-de-sac, casting golden patches on the neatly manicured lawns. It was the kind of neighborhood you'd see in real estate brochures: pristine houses, white picket fences, and friendly neighbors who waved as they watered their flower beds. I had lived here for years, enjoying the sense of safety and order, believing that nothing could disrupt this little slice of suburban paradise. Every morning, I would sip my coffee on the porch, watching joggers pass by and kids ride their bikes, without a care in the world. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a dream realized. The neighbors had always been pleasant, our community gatherings were lively, and there was a comforting rhythm to the way things worked. Everyone respected each other's space, and despite minor disagreements, like whose turn it was to host the summer block party, things were always resolved with a handshake and a smile. But looking back now, I realize that perfection is often an illusion. Beneath the surface of this idyllic neighborhood, there were things I hadn't noticed before. Small, almost insignificant details that, in hindsight, should have been red flags. The way certain neighbors spoke in hushed tones when I passed by. The odd, knowing glances exchanged between a select few at community events. The strange absence of any real discussion about rules or regulations. Yet an unspoken sense of control that seemed to govern the neighborhood. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. At the time, I brushed it all off as my imagination. After all, what could possibly be wrong in a place like this? But I was about to learn that even the most picture-perfect neighborhoods can hide secrets. And sometimes those secrets come knocking at your door when you least expect them. It started with a letter. A plain white envelope tucked neatly into my mailbox with no return address. At first glance, it looked official. Thick paper, a bold header that read Homeowners Association Violation Notice, and a neatly typed message inside. My stomach twisted as I scanned the words. Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that your property is in violation of community guidelines. You are required to remove the unauthorized modifications to your front yard immediately. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines and further action by the HOA. I read it twice, then a third time. HOA? No, that didn't make sense. When I bought this house, one of the main selling points had been the absence of a homeowners association. No overbearing rules, no surprise fees, just the freedom to live peacefully. And yet, here it was, a formal warning as if I had unknowingly agreed to their authority. I flipped the letter over, searching for more details. No contact number, no website, just a P.O. box address at the bottom. My unease deepened. Who were these people? And why were they acting like they had power over me? Stepping onto my porch, I looked around the neighborhood. Everything seemed normal. The Petersons across the street were unloading groceries, old Mr. Daniels was watering his lawn, and kids were chalking hopscotch patterns onto the sidewalk. Nothing about this place felt different. Yet, in my hands, I held proof that something was off. I decided to ask around. Maybe this was some kind of mistake, a mix-up with another property. I tucked the letter into my pocket and headed next door to see if my neighbor, Sarah, knew anything about it. But as soon as I mentioned the letter, I saw something shift in her expression. A flicker of hesitation, a nervous glance toward the other houses. Oh, yeah, she said, forcing a smile. I got one of those once. It's probably nothing, just do what they say and it'll go away. That didn't sit right with me. She was brushing it off, but I could see the tension in her posture, and the way she avoided eye contact. That told me everything I needed to know. This was no mistake. As I walked back home, the feeling of unease deepened. Someone was trying to enforce rules that shouldn't exist. Someone wanted control, and I was about to find out just how far they were willing to go to get it. I didn't have to wait long to meet the people behind the letter. The very next morning, just as I was stepping outside with my coffee, I saw them. 3 men in crisp, polo shirts, clipboards in hand, marching up my driveway like they owned the place. Their expressions were stone-cold serious, the kind of look bureaucrats wore when they knew they had power over you. But something about them felt off. The tallest one, a man with slicked back hair and mirrored sunglasses, took the lead. He didn't offer a handshake or even introduce himself. Instead, he simply held up a folder and flipped it open, revealing a document I'd never seen before. "Mr. Thompson," he said in a clipped tone, "we need to discuss your ongoing violation of HOA guidelines." I narrowed my eyes, crossing my arms. "Excuse me, my violation? First off, I never signed up for an HOA. And second, who exactly are you?" The man barely reacted. "We represent the Community Preservation Committee, as outlined in our neighborhood charter. All homeowners are required to maintain their properties according to our guidelines." I let out a dry laugh. "Neighborhood charter? I read every document when I bought this house. There was no HOA, no charter, no rules beyond city ordinances." The second man, a stocky guy with a clipboard, sighed dramatically. "Mr. Thompson, arguing won't change the facts. You've already been warned. If you refuse to comply, fines will be issued and further actions will be taken." There it was. That smug little power play, the way they spoke, the way they stood too close, their postures rigid with authority. They were trying to intimidate me, but I wasn't about to back down. I stepped forward, closing the space between us. "You're bluffing," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "If you had any real authority, you'd have proper documentation, not some vague notice without a phone number. And let's be honest, if there was an HOA here, don't you think I'd have known about it before now?" The slick-haired man's jaw tightened. I could see the wheels turning behind his sunglasses, calculating his next move. The third guy, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke, his voice quieter but laced with something more sinister. "Mr. Thompson, people who cause trouble in this neighborhood usually regret it." A slow, cold anger spread through me. Was that a threat? The man held up his hands, feigning innocence. "Of course not. Just a friendly reminder. It's easier to follow the rules than to fight them." I felt my pulse in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me that these men weren't just enforcing fake rules. They were running a scam. A dangerous one. And from the way Sarah had reacted the day before, I wasn't the first person they had tried to strong-arm. I took a deliberate step back, plastering on a smirk. "All right, gentlemen, you've made your point. Now get off my property." The stocky man scoffed. "You're making a mistake." I said, "Get off," I repeated louder this time. For a few tense seconds, none of them moved. Then, finally, the leader gave a sharp nod, snapping his folder shut. "We'll be in touch," he said, before turning on his heel and striding back to their car. I watched as they climbed into a sleek black SUV, far too expensive looking for a simple community committee. As they pulled away, my hands clenched into fists. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I wasn't the type to let things go, especially when something didn't sit right. And this stank of something rotten. The moment those so-called HOA reps drove away, I knew I had to dig deeper, because if there was one thing I was sure of, it was that these men weren't just overzealous neighborhood enforcers. They were running a scam. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the letter spread out in front of me, along with every official document I had from when I bought the house. My deed, property tax records, the original purchase agreement. Nowhere was there a mention of an HOA. No signatures, no contracts, nothing. So if there was no actual homeowners association, who the hell were these people? I started with the return address on the letter, a P.O. box listed at the bottom. A quick online search turned up nothing. Not even a fake website or a mention of a Community Preservation Committee. That was my first real confirmation that something shady was going on. Legitimate HOAs had online portals, public records, meeting minutes. This group? Ghosts. The more I searched, the more disturbing things became. I checked my county's property records, scanning for any mention of a legally registered HOA governing my neighborhood. Again, nothing. No board members, no incorporation details, just a big, fat zero. Then I widened my search. If this was a scam, I wasn't the only target. I needed to talk to my neighbors, the ones who weren't afraid to speak up. The first person I called was an older gentleman named Mr. Dawson, who lived a few streets over. I'd always known him as the guy who built extravagant holiday displays, the kind that made local news every Christmas, but when I asked him about the HOA, his voice turned grim. "Oh, them," he muttered. "Yeah, they came after me last year, claimed my decorations were disrupting community aesthetics, and that I needed to pay a fine or take them down." I frowned. "And did you?" A bitter chuckle. "Didn't have a choice. They threatened to put a lien on my house. I figured it wasn't worth the fight." I felt my blood pressure spike. "Mr. Dawson, did you ever sign anything agreeing to an HOA?" A pause. Then, "No. Now that you mention it, I don't think I did." That was it. I had my proof. This wasn't just a case of overreach. These guys were running a full-blown racket. I called 2 more neighbors and heard nearly identical stories. Fake fines, harassment, threats of legal action, and every single one of them had never signed up for an HOA. These men were preying on people's fear, manipulating them into paying money they didn't owe. But there was still one question left, unanswered. Who was actually behind this? I decided to pay a visit to City Hall the next morning, hoping to find some kind of paper trail. If this group was filing legal complaints or issuing fines, there had to be records. The clerk at the property office, a woman named Linda, greeted me with a warm but tired smile. "How can I help you?" I slid the letter across the counter. "I need to know if this HOA is actually registered with the city." She glanced at the document, then frowned. "Community Preservation Committee? Never heard of them." "Can you check?" I pressed. She sighed, typed a few things into her computer, and then shook her head. "Nope, no such entity registered under this name. And there's no HOA listed for your neighborhood either." I exhaled slowly. "So, officially, they don't exist?" "Correct," she confirmed. "If they're claiming authority, they're doing it illegally." My pulse quickened. I had suspected it, but now I knew. This wasn't just some aggressive HOA enforcement. This was fraud. And suddenly, something Sarah had said before, "Just do what they say and it'll go away," made perfect sense. They had been operating under the assumption that no one would question them, that homeowners would be too afraid or too confused to fight back, but I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I left City Hall with a new sense of determination. These men had spent years bullying people, forcing them to pay fake fines under the threat of legal action. They had made my neighbors feel powerless. It was time someone turned the tables, and that someone was going to be me. I had expected pushback, but I wasn't prepared for how fast they would strike back. The morning after my trip to City Hall, I found another letter stuffed into my mailbox. This time, not even in an envelope, just a crumpled piece of paper, hastily printed with big, bold letters, "Final warning, immediate compliance required." Below it, a list of new violations they had magically come up with overnight. My trash cans were supposedly left out for too long. My grass was half an inch over their approved height. My porch light was the wrong wattage. And the kicker? A $500 fine due within 48 hours, or further consequences would be enforced. I let out a bitter laugh. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. By the time I stepped outside, I realized they were taking things beyond just letters. Someone had egged my front door. Not a childish prank. This was deliberate. The sticky mess dripped down the wood, the dried yolk baking under the morning sun. And then I noticed the tire tracks in my lawn, deep grooves carved into the grass like someone had swerved onto my property on purpose. I felt my jaw tighten. This was intimidation. They wanted me scared. They wanted me to give up. I wasn't going to. The harassment didn't stop there. That night, I caught a dark SUV idling down the street, headlights off, just sitting there, watching. The same one from before. I stared at it from my living room window, phone in hand, debating whether to call the police. But what would I even say? "Hey, officers, there's a car parked on the street." It wasn't illegal to be creepy, and yet, the moment I stepped onto my porch, the engine revved, and the SUV peeled away. I wasn't imagining it. They were watching me. The final straw came 2 days later. I woke up to find a notice of lien taped to my door. It was printed on official-looking letterhead, complete with fake legal jargon, claiming that since I had refused to pay my fines, my home was now at risk. I clenched the paper in my hands, my pulse hammering. I knew it wasn't real. I had already confirmed with City Hall that this HOA didn't exist, but they were counting on me panicking. They were counting on me folding. I took a deep breath. If they thought I was going to roll over, they had picked the wrong homeowner to mess with. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to expose them. I knew I couldn't take them down alone. These guys were calculated, operating just within the cracks of the law, preying on people's fear and ignorance. If I was going to beat them, I needed someone who knew exactly how to tear their scam apart. Legally. That's how I found myself sitting in the dimly lit office of Daniel Carter, a no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for exposing fraud. The kind of guy who didn't just play by the rules, he weaponized them. I slid the stack of fake violation notices across his desk. He skimmed through them, his sharp eyes narrowing as he reached the so-called notice of lien. Then he let out a low whistle. "This," he said, holding up the paper, "is absolute bullshit." That was all I needed to hear. Daniel wasted no time. First, we documented everything: the fraudulent fines, the intimidation tactics, even the property damage. He had me file a police report, not because we expected immediate action, but to start a paper trail. These guys relied on scaring people into silence. If we built enough of a case, they wouldn't just lose, they'd be looking at real criminal charges. Then came the most important part. We needed proof of their scam in action, which meant setting a trap. The plan was simple. I would pretend to cave. I sent an email, one Daniel helped me craft, stating that I was willing to resolve my violations, but needed to discuss payment options. Within 2 hours, I had a response. They were eager, practically salivating at the thought of shaking me down. They agreed to meet the next evening at a local cafe. Perfect. Because what they didn't know was that Daniel had already contacted law enforcement. When the night came, I walked into that cafe with my phone recording in my pocket. The same 3 men were waiting for me, smug as ever. Slick Hair leaned forward. "Glad you came to your senses, Mr. Thompson." I forced a nervous chuckle, playing my part. "Yeah, I don't want any trouble." They launched into their usual script: fake legal jargon, veiled threats, the promise that this would all go away if I just paid up. And that's when I asked the million-dollar question. "So, who exactly gets this money?" Clipboard guy barely hesitated. "It goes toward community upkeep. Daniel had warned me to press." "Right. But who handles it?" I checked with City Hall, and they said there's no official HOA here. For the first time I saw doubt flicker in their eyes. Slick Hair's jaw tensed. "That's not something you need to worry about." Wrong answer. Because just as he said it, 2 plainclothes officers stood up from a nearby table. "Actually," one of them said, flashing his badge, "we do need to worry about it." The look on their faces? Priceless. The officers escorted them out, and as they left, Slick Hair shot me a venomous glare. But I just smiled, because I knew. This wasn't just the end of their scam. It was the beginning of their downfall. The moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived. With the police involved and Daniel working behind the scenes, we had gathered more than enough evidence to expose the scam once and for all. But I didn't just want them arrested. I wanted everyone in the neighborhood to know exactly what had been happening right under their noses. So, we did something bold. We called a community meeting. At first, I wasn't sure how many people would show up. After all, fear had kept most of them silent for years. But when I arrived at the local clubhouse that evening, I was stunned. Nearly half the neighborhood had packed the room. People whispered among themselves, their faces a mixture of curiosity and unease. That unease turned to shock when I stepped up to the front and said, "Everything the HOA has been telling you is a lie." I didn't waste time. I held up the fake notices, the so-called liens, the threats. I explained how these men had forged their authority, scaring people into paying thousands in fines they never owed. I showed official city records proving that no legal HOA had ever existed here. And then, for the final nail in the coffin, I played the recording from the cafe, where they had all but admitted to pocketing the money. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Murmurs of anger. Recognition. Then from the back of the room, a voice rang out. Mr. Dawson, the elderly neighbor they had scammed last year. So that's why they threatened to take my house. Those bastards. A woman near him stood up. They fined me $100 or $200 last year for a mailbox they didn't like. I almost sold my car to pay it off. One by one, the stories spilled out. People who had been too afraid to speak suddenly found their voices. And as the anger in the room swelled, I finally spotted them, Slickhair and his goons, standing near the exit, their faces pale. They had come, probably thinking they could still control the narrative. But not this time. Slickhair raised his hands, forcing a smile. Now, let's not jump to conclusions. You lied to us, someone shouted. You took our money, another voice roared. People turned on them, stepping forward, the energy in the room shifting from confusion to pure fury. Then the doors swung open. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. The color drained from Slickhair's face. Clipboard Guy tried to make a run for it, but before he could even reach the exit, an officer blocked his path. Gentlemen, one officer said, pulling out his handcuffs, you're going to need to come with us. And just like that, it was over. As the scammers were let out in handcuffs, I looked around the room. The fear that had once controlled this neighborhood was gone, replaced by something stronger. Unity. One of my neighbors turned. To me, eyes still wide. You really took them down. I smiled. We did. For the first time in a long time, I felt it. True freedom. And this time, no fake HOA was ever going to take it away again. In the weeks that followed, the fake HOA crumbled like the house. Of cards it was. With their ringleaders facing fraud charges, the remaining members of their so-called Community Preservation Committee vanished. Their scam exposed for all to see. The fabricated fines, the bogus threats, all of it null and void. Anyone who had ever paid into their scheme was set to receive their money back, thanks to a class action lawsuit spearheaded by my lawyer, Daniel. Justice wasn't just served, it was etched into the very foundation of our neighborhood. For the first time in years, people could breathe easy. No more mysterious letters, no more fear. Instead of living under the shadow of intimidation, our community came together, stronger than ever. The paranoia that had once lingered in the air had vanished, replaced by something we had all but forgotten: trust. One evening, as I stood on my porch with a well-earned beer in hand, Sarah walked over, a small smile on her face. You really did it, she said. You took them down. I chuckled, shaking my head. We all did. We just needed someone to light the fire. She nodded, glancing around at the peaceful street. It finally feels like home again. As I watched the sunset paint the sky, in shades of gold and crimson, I realized something. Bullies thrive in silence. They count on fear to keep people compliant, but the moment you stand up and fight back, they crumble. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to start the fight. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. Don't forget to tap the bell icon to stay updated, and let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? Your support means the world.